Um, I'm going on 80 years old, um, and I'm feeling my age. Uh, as I say, I thought I was going to be at church, and I was about to say it was great being back at church, but the church door wasn't open. In any event, I grew up on Dale Road, which is off Penfield Road, in the town of Penfield, but right on the Brighton border. And it was a little house in a wonderful, wonderful neighborhood. It was just the best neighborhood that anybody could ever grow up in. No one ever locked their doors. It was a religious mix, Protestants and Irish Catholics, and we were the only Jewish family for probably 20 miles. I grew up playing in Corbett's Glen and in Ellison Park. Basically fishing, hunting, trapping, playing sports down in Corbett's Glen. We used to play football and baseball there, and we would play our big rivals in Ellison Park. We also had BB gun wars, which is hard to believe, but we wore goggles. And in those days, nobody ever thought about the safety. We played ice hockey down in Ellison Park and Cobbs Hill. And everybody played Little League. Most everybody was in Boy Scouts at Troop 80 at Indian Landing School. Everybody took piano from the lady down the street. In those days, Indian Landing was a K through 8 school. In 8th grade, I got the idea that I wanted to go to prep school. And I was reading this book called Goodbye, Mr. Chips. And I got this idea that I wanted to apply to Andover. God knows why. And I applied to Andover. I took an exam and I was accepted. My father said I could go as long as I got a full scholarship. Well, I only got a half scholarship. I didn't go. And I'm glad I didn't go because I really enjoyed high school. Anyway, so more of that later. I grew up at Temple Bethel, which was a conservative temple on Park Avenue. My family, even though they went to temple, they really weren't very culturally Jewish, and they really weren't part of the Jewish community. They were really more closely connected to people in my neighborhood. My great-grandparents came to Rochester in 1870 or so. My mother's family came from Central Europe, and my father's family came from Sweden. My mother's family were doctors and scientists and well-educated people. My grandfather was a doctor. He graduated from Cornell Med School in 1902. Their family settled in Syracuse and eventually came to Rochester. My father's side came from Sweden, which was unusual for Jewish people at that time. My grandfather worked in he had a tobacco store on Front Street. He had a very unusual family. He had 9 or 10, I don't remember how many brothers and sisters. One of his brothers was a congressman from Rochester named Steve Jacobstein, who was a really famous guy. He was in Congress, I think, in 1920 to 1926. He also taught economics at Columbia and the U of R. And he later on ended up in the Brookings Institute, where I visited him once before he died. My father's business, my father had a wholesale egg business, wholesale grocery business, and a lot of it was the egg and butter business, which I'll get to later. My mother was a housewife. Typically in my neighborhood, all the women were housewives. Everybody had one car. Our only connection with Black people was cleaning ladies walking up and down our street. Rochester was very segregated at the time, as it is now, but it was really segregated. My mother graduated from Barnard College in 1934, and my father from the U of R in 1930. And my father loved the U of R. He left a scholarship for Penfield High students at the U of R, and he really wanted me to go there, but I wanted to leave town. Um, they both died around 2000, and they bought their house on Dale Road in 1938 for $3,000. I was really an overachieving kid. I was kind of a wild kid, but I was really overachieving. I got my Eagle Scout at 13, which I think at the time was the youngest in Monroe County. I was in the Order of the Arrow. And I also went to Philmont Scout Ranch when I was 13 or 14 with another 30 or 40 kids from Rochester, which was a great experience. We hiked in the Sierra Madres Mountains, and we rode horses as well. I was bar mitzvah when I was 13. I was playing the piano. I was on all the teams in Indian Landing. We had a football, basketball, and baseball team, and our principal rival was Allen's Creek. We had kind of a league back then. I'll never forget the fact that when we had a fellow named Scott Turner at my school, and his father was Bob Turner from WHAM. He was a sports announcer. And one night we're eating dinner, and we always listen to Bob Turner, and I hear all of a sudden the score of Indian Landing School versus Allen's Creek. Indian Landing beat Allen's Creek 24-23, and Steve Jacobstein had 10 points. It was really, it was shocking to hear this on the radio. I also had an egg root, which I got from my father. I developed over a period of time 60 or 70 families in the area that I delivered eggs to. And then that egg root went on for generations with my brothers, different kids in the neighborhood. I don't know when it ended, but it was a great way to make money, and I really enjoyed doing it. I was the salutatorian of Indian Landing in my 8th grade year. I went to Penfield for a year, high school, because we couldn't go to Brighton anymore. They changed the school districts on us. I didn't like Penfield. It was just changing from a central school. I really didn't like it. It was too small, and I really felt weird because at the assemblies, they would open all the assemblies every week with all kinds of Christian prayers, and it really made me feel uneasy. So I transferred to Monroe, where a lot of my friends from Indian Landing had already gone, and a lot of them went to McQuaid. I went there 3 years. I played 5 different sports. I was a class officer. I won a New York State scholarship. I was in a high school fraternity and active at the Monroe Y. My senior year, I was a City of Rochester tennis champion. And I really enjoyed Monroe. Monroe was really a terrific school, and I got a great education there. I then went to Dartmouth College and graduated in 1963. I majored in history, and I minored in comparative literature. And I really loved my courses and really feel like I got a great education. I was in the Glee Club for a couple of years, and I was in ski patrol. I was in a fraternity, the same fraternity that Joe Simpson was in a different college. I played fraternity hockey, which was the most fun I had in college. I regret not going to a co-ed school because none of the sort of elite Eastern schools at the time were co-ed. My 2 best friends at Dartmouth, however, were Unitarians, just by chance. My roommate was a lifelong Unitarian in Syracuse. The Dartmouth at the time was totally white. I think we had 1 black, 1 Hispanic, and 1 Asian kid in my class. The minorities were Jewish kids. I think there was a quota on Jews at 10%. That's really changed now because 50% of the school now is children of color. I had interesting summer jobs. I worked at Kodak 2 summers as a millwright and electrician's helper. One summer I was the assistant to the city manager. And one summer I worked for the center of governmental institution in downtown Rochester. The most fun I had, and Glenn Cook will relate to this because I sealed driveways like Glenn did. I sealed driveways with a law school classmate of mine named Don Elhart, not the Channel 13 Don Elhart. Don's father was a janitor at the U of R, and we had to make a lot of money so he could go back to school. We used to seal driveways in Brighton, and for us to get jobs in Brighton, we'd go to streets that were predominantly Jewish. I would go up to the doorbell, ring the doorbell, tell them my name, and we did a super job. And before you know it, we did the whole street. But toward the end of the year, we didn't have enough money so Don could go back to law school. So we started watering down our sealer, which was kind of funny at the time. We made enough money so Don could go back to law school. I went to Cornell Law School, graduated in 1966. We had about 120 guys. I say guys in my class. We had 4 women. I have to laugh because now it's over half women. First year, I lived in the dorms. The second year, I lived in a house with 9 other guys at 101 Eddy Street, which was kind of famous at the time. We had 2 kitchens in the house, and in the kitchen in the first floor, it was a double door. We cut the door in half. We threw all our garbage and beer cans in there, and eventually we were cited by the public health department, and there was an article about us in the Ithaca Journal. As I say, there were 9 guys. 2 of the guys were Italian, and we had spaghetti probably 4 nights a week because we could get all you could eat spaghetti from one of the restaurants near Ithaca College. At the end of the year, we had a party, and it got out of hand. Most of the people from my class were there. We lit a bonfire in the backyard. Before I know it, some of the people were throwing furniture in the bonfire. We got sued by the landlord for $9,000, and we all got married our 3rd year. And anyway, our wives ended up paying for the damages. I got married my 3rd year of law school, and we had an apartment overlooking Cuba Lake at a professor's house. It was $100 a month, and it was an absolutely beautiful apartment. I went in the Army. I was in the combat engineering unit in the reserves. It was a unit in Penn Yan. I have some funny stories about the reserves. I eventually transferred into the 401st Civil Affairs Company, and I got a commission as a first lieutenant. When I was in basic training, it was really it was kind of a terrible experience because we had a very bad racial mix. We had half Black kids that were from Detroit, where they had emptied the jails after the riots in Detroit, and half the kids were rednecks who were real bigots. And frankly, I used to sleep with one eye open because it was kind of a dangerous place. I also ended up guarding the gold at Fort Knox, where I was stationed. I had some funny experiences. I had to hit 20 targets out of 40 to get out of basic training. And the first day it was raining. I had glasses. I was a lousy shot anyway. And I hit 1 target. So I had to hit 19 out of 20 the next day. And I didn't know how I was possibly going to do it because 19 was a sharpshooter. Anyway, I went to go to shoot. And the guy that was in charge of the range looked at my name tag. And his name tag, his name was Goldberg or something like that. So he said, "Well, you're a landsman," which was, a reference to being Jewish. And he said, "Don't worry." I told him my story. He said, "Don't worry about it. You'll get 19 targets." And I did. And I got out of basic training. I have no idea to this day how many targets I actually hit. I then worked for the same law firm. It's been the same law firm for 54 years. I've been a partner most of those years. I did all kinds of different work. I did corporate and business work early on. And then I switched to litigation. In the last 25 or 30 years, I did mostly matrimonial work. I was nominated to be the best lawyers in America. In my retirement, I'm just finishing up a few cases. I did a lot of pro bono work. I helped organize VSP, which is Services for Poor People. I represented a lot of Black churches early in my career, and I did a lot of work on model cities. I was in the board of trustees of the Bar Association, and I lectured quite a bit for the New York State Bar Association. My first marriage was Pam Williams in 1965. We were married the last year of law school. We had 4 children who ranged now in age from 52. We have 8 lineal grandchildren. The latest is 5 years old, and she's from Colombia. And my son, Mark, and his wife, who couldn't have children, adopted her from Colombia. His wife is Colombian. And they just got back from Colombia with this cute little girl named Yearly, and she's adorable. She's my youngest grandchild. The oldest is 20. In 1987, Pam and I were divorced amicably. We were close friends, and we just got divorced, and we ended up with joint custody of the kids and split custody. So the kids split their time between our 2 houses. We lived in the Park Avenue area. My kids all went to city schools, but the older kids went to Harley for high school. My daughter was messing around and not doing anything in middle school. So we sent her to Harley, where she really her grades were great, and she ended up at Cornell. And my second boy was at Monroe High School, and coming home from school his freshman year, he was beat up badly by a bunch of kids. Decided he didn't want to go to Monroe anymore, and he ended up at Harley for his last 3 years of high school. They had 1 academic scholarship a year, and he won it. And I got married. I was single for 10 years. I married Kay Edwards in 1997, and she has 3 sons. I have 3 stepsons, ages 56 to 49, and 4 step grandchildren from 25 to 5. My own kids were pretty high achieving kids and married high achieving kids, and they have a variety of careers. My son Mark lives in California. He's had a lot of startup companies in California and so in Silicon Valley, and his last job was with a company that was working on a cure for cancer. His wife is a PhD MD at Stanford, and she's on the faculty there. My daughter Stephanie is a social worker in Chicago, and her husband's a doctor with the University of Chicago. My son Adam is a really interesting kid. He majored in English at Dartmouth and did really well, and was going to teach. He wanted to teach high school in English. He went out to California for a year and ended up being a woodworker. He worked for a lady in California that was sort of like a Wendell Castle, and learned woodworking and furniture making. And then he got married. He moved to Hawaii for 10 years and worked for a Japanese architect. And now he's back living in Ithaca and makes furniture and does work in kitchens and has built a couple houses. And his wife he met her in college, and his wife is an environmental consultant. And my youngest daughter lives in Boston, and she works for a company called Mass, which is a not-for-profit company. And they design hospitals and things all over the world, and she works on exhibits, and she's been to Rwanda and Cambodia and Singapore working on exhibits. They built a lot of hospitals in Rwanda, and her husband is he's trying to think. He works for a company that designs, works for, I'm drawing a blank. He went to MIT anyway, and he works for developers in Boston. So anyway, the careers of the kids have been pretty interesting, and the careers of my stepkids have been equally interesting. My adult life has been kind of adventuresome, I guess. I was an avid skier. I was in the ski patrol at Dartmouth, and then I was a ski patrol at Swain. I was a club tournament tennis player, and I was active on a number of boards when I was younger. I was the president of Lewis Street Board, and the highlight of my career really was creating a daycare center at Lewis Street, which was really kind of an exciting project. I was in the president of the Monroe Y board twice, and I was on the corporate YMCA board, I think in the early 80s. I was a trustee of the Monroe County Bar Association, and then recently I was the Horizons at Harley board.
What happened?
I was the most interesting thing I probably did. I was a member of a rowdy group of guys called the Four Corners Canoe Club. It was probably the most fun I ever had in my life. There's 12 different guys. They really were my best friends at the time. We took canoe trips and whitewater trips, and canoe trips and hiking the Adirondacks. And in Canada, we used to go to Algonquin Park, we went to Temagami, 8 hours north of Toronto.
You have not put the banana in there?
We had a number of mishaps. One guy almost drowned on the Afflegachi River. I almost drowned going over a waterfall in Temagami, which is a long story, but I never should have done it. We used to have winter outings at Letchworth Park, and we usually had meetings once a month at Rocky's Restaurant. I got active in politics early on. I ran for the New York State Assembly as a Democratic liberal. I lost in a district that was 7-1, and I'm really glad I lost. I was on the Attica Commission with the Attica Uprising in 1971 and worked there 6 months. I can only tell you that Attica is one of the scariest places in the face of the earth. After Kay and I were married, we had a cottage in Canada up in Bob's Lake for 12 years or so. It was a beautiful lake. It was probably 15 miles long, and it was mostly uninhabited. You could drink out of the water. It was beautiful forest. It was a great place. You know, we did a lot of fishing, we played golf. Kay and I really enjoyed it for 12 years, but it got to be too much. And we eventually sold it. Kay and I also took many trips when we were a little bit younger. We went to Asia, we went to China, Japan, we went to South America, we went to Europe many times. We usually went with our friends from Chautauqua Lake, which were really our closest friends at the time. We also used to go to Chautauqua Institute. Next subject, my health. I tore my Achilles playing tennis 4 years ago, and that was the end of my athletic career. I've had many operations, and I was diagnosed with kidney cancer about 3 years ago. I had chemo and I had radiation, and so far my scans have been okay. And as I say to people, I'm upright and still enjoying life. I joined the UU Church. Well, my story of joining the UU Church is interesting. As I said, I grew up in Temple Bethel in Rochester. My first wife was Catholic for a while, and then she went to Third Presbyterian Church. And then in college, she saw the light and became a Unitarian. She sort of went through a conversion to Judaism. We were married at Temple Beth Kodesh, which is a Reformed temple. After that, we joined Temple Beth Sinai. We left Temple Beth Sinai because the rabbi that we liked there left, and the rabbi that took his place was way too rabbinical for us, and we didn't like him. We had heard about Dick Gilbert at the First Unitarian Church. We tried it, and I was hooked. We were hooked, and we became members in the mid-'70s. We had 4 kids that went to RE. 3 of the kids were in that Biblical Jesus class and musicals with Liz Strong. Unfortunately, none of my kids, with the exception of Maggie, go to church, nor do their spouses. Maggie married a Jewish guy, and they live, his parents are Reformed rabbis, and they live kind of a traditional Jewish life in Boston. Pam and I were divorced in 1987. We both stayed at the First Unitarian Church, but eventually she moved over to the First Universalist Church during one of our many upheavals. Kay and I have attended church there for many years, although she's really a Presbyterian at heart. She was active on many committees. We were married by Dick Gilbert and Ann Wasdorf, who was a Presbyterian minister and a friend of Kay's, in the UU Garden in 1997. My daughter Stephanie was married by Dick Gilbert a year later in its church. In my younger years, I was very active at church. I was on 2 MREs with Dick Gilbert, and mostly we talked about the parish house and tax issues involving the parish house. I taught Sunday school for many years. But the highlight of what I did was being an advisor to the senior high youth group with Tina Simpson before she became a minister, and Judy Dale, and we did some really great things in the senior youth group. We worked at a soup kitchen at Blessed Sacrament Church. We attended a black church, which was a really interesting experience for everybody. We had sleepovers in church with other UU youth groups. We worked in the inner city, clean up, and did all kinds of great things. Kay and I have been in a soul matters group for couples in well over 10 years in people's houses. And we usually don't talk that we're following the soul matters agenda. We talk about different stuff.
Steve,
Yeah.
I think you may be holding papers over your speaker. You're fading out a little.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you. Anyway, we were in the soul man. Is it better now?
Little bit, yeah.
We were in the Soul Matters group for 10 years, and with that Soul Matters group, we really never talked about Soul Matters subject. We really just talked about different subjects chosen by whoever was in charge of that meeting. I've been in 2 men's groups. One was in my 50s, which was disbanded, and another men's group that we've been together for 10 years. I think Scott Taylor organized it. We have dinners, we meet at church. A number of the people in the church have been very prominent. The members of the men's group, Ron Steinman, Dick Schwartz, Joe Simpson, Lou Manamaji, Bob Sandholzer, Stu Levinson. I may have left somebody out, but it's a great group of guys. And sometimes we talk about subjects, soul matter subjects. Recently, we've been talking a lot about racism and anti-racism and Black oppression. I've been doing meditation with Joy Collins. I was in the Board of Trustees years ago, but I quit because after I was divorced, I really couldn't I didn't have time to be raising 4 kids and going to trustee meetings, so I ended up quitting. Let's see here. So, in conclusion here, I try to watch as many Zoom church services as possible. And I can't wait for the church services to come back in person. I admit that when I look around church, I don't know very many people anymore. I know the people as kids I taught in Sunday school and some of the older folks, but I don't really know many of the younger members. It's good to see so many younger members. Early on, I was close to Liz Strong and Dick Gilbert. As they say in my younger years at church, Kay and I were very close to David Keyes when he was here, even though I know he was quite controversial. And I was close to Scott Taylor. He put our men's group together. I was disappointed when Scott left and went to Boston. But I probably in the minority that was upset when the way he was treated by the UUA. But anyway, that's my story. I guess people can ask questions or whatever. Anyway, I'm done.
I am going to take the spotlight